on that. This next item is the proposed decommissioning and reusing land at the Austin the Austin Police Department headquarters. Commissioner Weber, do you want to introduce this, or?
Sure, I can start out. So, y'all, this came out of our now new way of collaborating with the council committee, the public safety committee that's made up of 4 council members. And one of the items that the chair, Councilmember Flanagan, asked this committee to start trial ballooning and bringing to the public and the media is Jimmy Flanagan's idea that APD headquarters would be moved somewhere else, and that land right there at 8th and I-35 would be developed, and that it redeveloped in a way that honors the movement that's been going on this summer as far as valuing Black and brown lives, and that it would also be the embodiment of council's reimagining public safety, so that the public safety aspects of it would not necessarily be police, but would be services and things like that.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think we have, I'm getting the name of our speaker from the, sorry, there it is. We have Daryl Alexander on the line from the CFO's office, the city CFO office. Is that correct, Mr. Alexander?
Chair, I think Connor Kinney was going to introduce the speakers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted, I didn't know if Connor knew that was a new person on the line. I wanted to make sure and let them know that. Connor, are you on the line?
I'm on the line.
Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, well,
on the line. Am I unmuted?
Yes, everyone, I think we can hear everyone. Connor, do you want to go ahead and introduce the panel and start the conversation?
Sure, great. Well, thank you very much for having me out. My name is Connor Kinney. For those who don't know me, I am in the private sector now. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at the Civilitude Group, a local development and engineering firm. But I'm the immediate past chair of the Planning Commission, and just stepped off a couple weeks ago, and I think that's kind of how I'm useful here, in that we spend a lot of time working on the plans for downtown, including this area. So with me today, I have Selena Shee, who's the president of the Austin EMS Association, our paramedics union, Shoshana Krieger, the program director with BASTA, Local Tenants' Rights and Assistance Association, and Preston James, CEO of Div Inc., a nonprofit organization working to transform the existing entrepreneur tech ecosystem into a more authentically inclusive environment. So this is a pretty diverse group because, this is the first in what I'll expect to be kind of a long series of discussions, but I wanted to illustrate in the discussions that I've had with folks, a really diverse set of needs and that this site could address. And so just to kind of talk a little bit about the site, and then I'll let the panelists speak a little bit, and then we'll open up for questions. Is that all right?
Very good. Yes, please.
Okay, great. So I just want to first of all say that I really do not see this as part of the defund the police conversation. APD has had complaints about this site for a long time. It's destined to be redeveloped with at least a substantial portion of the department moving off site. So it's really just a question of how to best use this site, and I think that's what the council committee is asking for. And it's also, this conversation I think is not necessarily specific to this site. So if different ideas start being developed for this site, we have a number of other publicly owned sites nearby, including the convention center. We don't know what's going to happen with that, I think, necessarily now. So I think we can continue to have this discussion about a site in this area of downtown. This site itself is under a city capital view corridor, which pretty severely constrains the height. But the city also did change plans for a capital view corridor over the Breckenridge Hospital tract recently in order to allow development there. So if the view corridor remains, I think we're probably looking at a, not very many floors development allowed here. If it was eased in some way, and in that sense, it would probably remain a city or hosted nonprofits or social services site. If the corridor, if the council wanted to look at using that, you could potentially, because of the value of the site, look at private office or residential development that could really subsidize quite a bit of space through like a public-private partnership. So I also don't think that funding is necessarily an impediment here, depending on how far council wants to take this. With that, the people that I've gathered here are, because if we really want to think about public safety beyond law enforcement and what are the things we can do as a city to improve the safety of our residents and help protect them from trauma and insecurity. And I am inspired and reminded of a conversation I had with some justice activists a few months ago, in which one thing that kept coming up was that poverty is really the main driver of whether an individual comes into conflict with their criminal justice system. So beyond just kind of what we think of as day-to-day safety, the degree to which we can alleviate and mitigate the impacts of poverty are certainly very relevant to the safety of our residents. With that, I'd like to let some of our panelists speak. And can I ask, what is the outside time limit for our session? I think we originally scheduled for about 30 minutes, which would be about another 20 minutes. Is that, are we operating on that?
We are running a little bit short, but I can give you 20.
Okay, great. Selena, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. Thank you so much, Connor, for having me. I just wanted to talk a little bit about APD headquarters. When I talked to Fox, when talking about APD headquarters, he agrees that, there are a lot of structural issues. The space is not used well. I do really think that it should continue to stay in the city's hands. Public safety in general has such a challenging time downtown. We see the most explosive growth downtown, and because it's growing so quickly, everything is very expensive. And so it has made it really challenging for the city to purchase land downtown to be able to house any public safety units. So, for example, I shared with y'all an email right now downtown, and I say from I-35 to Mopac, the river, all the way to 2222. I said to y'all many times before, we only have 2 stations. Here's one of them, and hopefully Rebecca can broadcast this. But also, you'll all have photos. So these are one of the 2 stations. So one of our stations is located at Del Seaton in their old parking garage. And you'll see that they are currently doing construction on the old hospital building, and our bay is literally at the edge of the construction site. And very often we have to relocate outside because it's too dangerous to be in the bay. And then when you park your ambulance, you have to walk outside across 4 lanes of traffic. I myself have almost been hit there coming out the exit because people gear up. They don't expect there to be pedestrians. And then you walk all the way over to the right side of that photo, and you see the entrance that's actually the office where you take a photo when you're getting a badge to get into Del Seaton. And so it's really crazy what we ask of EMS. We don't have the luxury to just purchase buildings like we might have the opportunity to do in Shady Hollow. And so that's why we're in these types of circumstances that are not safe for us and are not tenable, because at some point they will likely redo this parking garage because it's part of the old structure and put up a whole new building for the whole complex. So that, I really just use these photos to emphasize why we should keep them in public hands. Between Bob, Fox, and myself, we had talked about a long time ago when we were talking about convention center expansion and using that opportunity to create a joint public safety use facility so that during times of really high use of 6th Street on the weekend nights, that all the agencies can get together and debrief and talk about, are there any credible threats? What types of crowds are we expecting? What the game plan is? And right now we don't have that. And in fact, we use places like Caritas at night and other places as holding facilities, and it's just not appropriate for us to be using places that are primarily meant for homeless individuals to get services and other impromptu places to get services, for us to be using those type of facilities for public safety when we do have real estate downtown. And so I really hope that when y'all consider how the APD headquarters could be reused, that y'all will continue to allocate at least a few floors for public safety so that we have a place that we can get together, debrief, and use really functionally for the officers, for the medics, for the firefighters. I mean, APD won't have another place to house all of their officers downtown, their bikes, and that will make it really challenging for us to provide a good service downtown. So, you know, it is an idea that we've talked about in the past at the convention center. That probably is not going to happen given COVID and the current state of tourism. And so I think it would be appropriate to move some of those ideas to APD headquarters. And the last thing I'll say is just, you know, I don't know what kind of timeline we're looking at, but APD obviously has over 400 folks working in there right now. And I hope that there will continue to be a sector that will work with EMS and fire on being able to use that space to serve downtown.
Great, thank you, Selena. And Shoshana, are you with us?
I am.
Great, go ahead, and if we can try and keep a couple minutes at the end to see if there's questions, but go ahead.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks y'all for having me. This is outside of my general purview because what FOSTA does is we work with tenants at multifamily properties to form tenants associations to fight back against landlords who are behaving badly, to be able to effectuate their rights. And it was when Connor reached out about talking with y'all today, you know, and about framing tenants' rights and the work we do around public safety, which is logical framing, you know, got my juices flowing in my brain of like what the world look like if we really expanded our conception of public safety and would be able to have a place which housed and supported so many crucial nonprofit resources which exist in Austin. And a lot of our work, while traditionally it wouldn't be defined as public safety, a lot of what we do is in fact public safety. What we're dealing with every day is a power imbalance between landlords and tenants, which leaves tenants in very precarious positions and oftentimes results in housing instability, the most devastating act of which is an eviction, but oftentimes tenants who remain housed live with apartment managers who are bullying them because the tenants know that if they try to stick up for themselves, their leases aren't going to be renewed. We've had instances where managers are actually one mobile home park where we were working where it was actually stalking tenants. At another property we're working at right now, a maintenance worker, there are allegations around sexually inappropriate behavior from that maintenance worker towards tenants. And you have a lot of folks who are incredibly vulnerable, and even just the simple interaction of going into their management office can be a space of a lot of trauma. And so being able to support services which are able to correct some of that power imbalance, are able to allow tenants to be able to effectuate their rights is a step forward towards stabilizing tenants and stabilizing households, which then also means, there's a direct correlation between evictions and poverty. And Matthew Desmond, who I'm sure a lot of y'all know about his writings, he writes a lot on evictions. He talks about how oftentimes there's this misconception of that evictions cause or poverty causes evictions, but it's actually the inverse of that. Being evicted in and of itself just is the beginning of a ripple effect which is the kind of the cycle of poverty. So I am super curious just about, how these conversations unfold. And I think there's a lot of really a wonderful opportunity for rich, creative thought as we think about how such a space can be used.
Great, thank you, Shoshana. And then lastly, we have Preston James, and I'm really excited about the work that they've been doing over at DivInc, and with this site being almost a literal bridge between the east side and the kind of wealth and income generation downtown, and what we could do to more metaphorically bridge that divide. So, Preston, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. And thank you for the opportunity. So for me, one thing I'm really interested in is maximizing the opportunity for our communities to do a couple of things. Number one, obviously from the entrepreneurship perspective, how do we create more opportunities for the Black community, brown community, to explore, those who are aspiring entrepreneurs, to explore those opportunities and to build skill sets and get access to mentorship and the resources that they need. What we know is that there is a lack of access to the essential resources needed for entrepreneurship. But it doesn't start just at the entrepreneurship level. It does start at the earlier level as well. So, many of the, as I look at this opportunity, several of the questions and the inquiries that I had sort of, fulfill the broader viewpoint of how do we, sort of elevate the community by providing resources that address very specific needs and gaps that really raise the level of access to critical resources. And so, I did provide, some insights. So kind of, I don't know if I'm supposed to be sharing those questions, or is that for later, or, just providing an overview of, what DivInc can bring to this opportunity. But either way, I mean, DivInc is about entrepreneurship and creating entrepreneurship pathways for underrepresented entrepreneurs. And we are very, very focused on, how we provide access to those resources and create the infrastructure that allows them to grow from ideation all the way to the point where they're actually generating revenue and creating jobs, which ultimately is creating positive economic, socioeconomic impact for our communities. But even beyond that, like I said, is, how do we become very intentional in understanding the gaps of what the community needs and bringing those resources that they need to really make a socioeconomic impact.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, do you have a couple minutes left if you guys want to ask any questions, or I'm sure any of our panelists could go on all day about the kind of amazing stuff that they're doing.
So real quick, Connor, can we see, Mr. Alexander, could you give us what timelines that we're looking at for currently from the city's perspective, just in like a minute or two?
Yes, ma'am. The first phase is we have to find some place for APD to move to. So that first phase is assessing and analyzing what's the space need and the requirements for that. That effort will probably take anywhere from a month to 6 weeks before we can start that to do that. So we're looking at a max 6 weeks before we even begin that process. Once we have that process down, what they need, then we can start looking at what are the requirements and the options that we have, P3, do we have some other properties that we can move them in and things like that. But we initially have to find out what their space needs are and the requirements for the APD functions. And we're aware of some of the things that they have in place right now at APD. So we've had an initial meeting, but there's a couple more steps that need to happen. So I hope I answered your question with that.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to set some parameters. Like, this is a starting conversation. The city is managing this from a real estate perspective as well. So I wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that. And this is definitely the first time we're going to hear from these public groups, and we have a few more minutes to talk to them. So I'm going to stop and let you guys ask any questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Commissioner Weber, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just really curious, Connor, what, you said that it would be a short building, but I'm just really curious if you could give us some ideas of what it could look like. Could it be like half, spots for our public safety agencies and nonprofits, and then half expensive, what have you above? Like, what might it look like?
Right. So, with public property, the city actually has a lot of latitude to kind of free up the site and do special things with it. But just under what's kind of allowed there right now and what's in the vicinity, the work that the city has done with the Waller Creek Tunnel has reduced a lot of the flooding issues there. You do have Waller Creek running, right next to that side of the site. So that is something that has to be dealt with. But as you can see, all up and down the area, folks have figured out ways to engineer around that. So, you really have a lot of potential to really build out the site under the zoning in the area, really to the borders of the sidewalks. So the square footage kind of per floor, you can do a lot with, even under the Capitol View corridor. You could get, a number of floors. Based on the elevation there, maybe ballpark it like 8 to 10 floors. And then, really, if the city wanted to look at modifying the Capitol View corridors to maximize the public value of that land and decides that maybe the view from, I think the view that it's pegged to is at Pleasant Valley, like across the river, like a mile or two away, maybe the value to the city of having some services there might exceed the value of that entire view. So I think that's a conversation that council could have. And if they modified it, then, the value of that site is so huge that you could really stack an incredible amount of value on top of that with offices or residences, which could subsidize through a private-public partnership a lot of space for public and social service needs. So, a number of floors. And, a private developer, if they're doing private residences or a private office, they would probably want to look to having a side of the building that is maybe the entrance for that. And you might want to have the entrances to other stuff on other sides. But with the access right there to I-35, that would probably be the most obvious one. Or as well, I think there's a lot of value either socially or from a private developer perspective, to orienting things to the west where Waller Creek is, because, that whole area is getting overhauled. And even with the Red River Cultural District, we're really, with the city, needing to grapple with how we're going to envision that area. So I would say that on the outside, the sky's the limit, almost literally. And, on the inside, it could be fairly constrained. And that is a system and a balancing of interests that council would need to weigh itself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I hate to do this because I know you all have lots of questions, but unfortunately, this 90-minute timeline it's been tough for us, and we are right at that 90 minutes. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop this agenda item. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Selena. Thank you, Shoshana. Thank you, Preston, and Mr. Alexander. Thank you so much for your time. And we're looking forward to having more of these conversations, and we will keep you posted. Thank you very much. Final agenda item, guys.